Kindly join with me to chant the epitome of the Indian civilization, Gayatri Mahamantra. With your back straight, your hands on your laps, the left beneath the right, in a contemplative mood, let's chant Gayatri Mahamantra. Om Bhurabhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om. Today the journey furthers from the verse number 20 onwards. Despite of my efforts to create a pace, a reasonable pace, in order to cover a substantial part of the first chapter, somehow when it comes to deliberate and dispense justice with the subject, I am not able to encompass more than 4 to 5 verses in any of the program. Likewise, even today, we shall embark upon a very prominent part of the first chapter, which can be considered as a turning point for any seeker who is seriously in the pursuit of his spiritual journey. In the verse number 20, as the verse goes, I would confine myself to the deliberation in English, because the Sanskrit part would not be understood by the common.
अथ व्यवस्थितान् दृष्ट्वा धारतराष्ट्रान् कपिध्वजः प्रवृत्ते शस्त्रसम्पाते धनुः उद्यमे पाण्डवः ऋषिकेशं तदा वाक्यम् इदमाह महीपते.
Under the verse number 20, Arjun projects a desire to his mentor Keshav to place his chariot amidst both the armies, whereby he could conspicuously visualize the Kaurava faction. He is desirous to see and observe who all are standing there to fight with their army. And if I conceive the allegory from the parlance of the spiritual exercise, any seeker who shall embark upon his spiritual exercise after covering a distance to some extent, there shall arise a moment whereby, while internalizing within the seeker would like to observe and assess one's own conduct, that we term in a simple language as an introspection. One would like to synthesize one's own conduct, one's habits, propensities, the kind of allurement one is confronting in day-to-day life. And here too, the Arjuna now candidly expresses his desire to be placed amidst the battlefield so that he can be face to face to all those factions who are there to fight against him. And the moment he expresses his desire, it is mentioned over here that his chariot is borne with the flag that bears a symbol of Hanuman, Kapi Dhwaja. Now, this is something which is very astonishing. Mahabharata, it pertains to a different era. Here, the Arjuna, he is bearing a flag with the symbol of Hanuman upon it. What is a flag? If you rightly understand the essence of a flag, like we in India, we have a national flag which is tricolor with the Ashoka Chakra studded right in the middle of it. Now, when the tricolor flag appears before anyone, and likewise for any other citizen of this world, would have their own respective flag representing their nation. With us, if I recall, the moment we cite a tricolor, it is no more a simple band of three colors, three distinct colors, but instead it represents and disseminates a deep sense of the entire Indian civilization, this subcontinent. It talks about the esteem and glory of our own heritage. It is not merely a band of three colors. A flag holds great eminence for any person whosoever shall bear any kind of a flag. Even while amidst the battlefield, each regiment shall bear its own respective flag. As it is the convention worldwide, all armies, when they make a move, their regiments have their respective flags beside their national flag. Here, Arjuna has a chariot with the flag bearing the ape god, Hanuman. Hanuman is the ape god, one of the most eminent character of Ramayana. Now, Hanuman as a symbol on the flag of Arjuna, it makes a mention that Arjuna has right now declared the ape god, the Hanuman, as his idol. Something which he wants to live, something what he wants to thrive for. Now, the question comes when Arjuna has his mentor sitting right beside him, Keshava. And who's Keshava? As the allegory shall express, not only the allegory, but otherwise also, as we have a deep faith that Krishna is none else but the eternity manifested in the physical form. When you have the eternity, the cosmic divine intelligence sitting right beside you in the same chariot, then why should you at all, for any reason, feel a need to have a different symbol upon your flag? It would have been more righteous on the part of the Arjuna to have Keshav as a symbol on his flag. Or rather, if I may extend to say so, there was no need for Arjuna to have any other external source of inspiration or declaration or affirmation when he had his own true mentor sitting right beside him. Now, this is a very astonishing part. Astonishing for the reason that first, that there is a mention of a character, Hanuman, the ape god, that pertains to a different epic altogether, a different era. And besides, while having Keshava sitting right next, what was the need to bear some other idol as the symbol upon the flag? There must be some serious design in the mind of the script writer. Who's the script writer? The script writer is Muniveda Vyas. There must be some serious design in his mind while he chose to ascribe Arjuna with the ape god. Kapi Dhwaja. Kapi is the ape. It's an indication to Hanuman. What is that serious design in the mind of the script writer? That must be understood. There is something in disguise that needs to be expressed. From the aspect of a seeker, since the entire color and genre of our deliberation of Bhagavad Gita is upon the technology of consciousness, we are utilizing each and every allegory that finds a mention over here to express and detail it from the perception of the technology of consciousness. Any spiritual seeker, whosoever shall sincerely embark to introspect one's own self, shall have that courage to do so only when he is vested with adequate energy, pranic energy, adequate enthusiasm, adequate reserve of courage. Otherwise, it is not possible for anyone to rightfully introspect one's own self in a justifiable manner. When it comes to introspect one's own self without holding any kind of a bias, generally people discount themselves. For one reason or another cause, one shall always discount one's own conduct. But when a true seeker embarks upon the rightful process of introspection, he would dare himself, he would probe his insight, fearlessly charge upon his own self in order to see where all lies that is the fault. Because he is there to correct the fault line. He is there to advance towards the purity. He is there to inch towards the higher levels of consciousness. Arjuna, too, as a seeker, is right now placed amidst a battlefield where he is now to confront his own propensities, which have been holding his progress since past so many births. And when the time comes, he is in need for the ape god as the flag with him, as the torch bearer with him. Because Hanuman is understood to be the child of the pranic energy, the wind god, Vayudev. He is the child of the Vayudev, and Vayu finds its mention in light of the pranic energy, the life energy, the bioenergy which we bear. We all know that a human being is sheathed with 5 encasing of 5 different subtle bodies, one out of which is known as the Annamaya Kosh, that has a gross manifestation. The second one is the Pranamaya Kosh, known as the energy body. The third is the Manomaya Kosh, known as the mind, the mental body. Fourth is the Vijnanamaya Kosh, and the last is the blissful Anandamaya Kosh. The Pranamaya Kosh holds the entire might to govern the levels of courage, enthusiasm, chivalry, might, enterprising instinct, etc. in a human being. If the levels of the pranic energy, they come down, they deplete, immediately any human being shall come under the spell of inertia, sloth, discouraged, deluded. The acumen of discernment shall vanish. All the faculties of the brain, while existing, shall cease to function anymore. Whenever an opportunity comes, when a person is taken aback with some untoward incident, there is a large drain of pranic energy from his existence. And when you lose a large flux of pranic energy, immediately you find that your intellect is working no more. Your mind has disappeared. Your chitta, where there is the memory store, shall not be able to retrieve any piece of information. One would be absolutely deluded. And therefore, Arjuna, while standing amidst the battlefield, has charged his own propensities candidly and now wants to combat them. And at this moment, he is in dire need of pranic energy. And therefore, he chooses and gives himself the symbol of the ape god Hanuman, the source of pranic energy. Beside that, Hanuman is also considered as the epitome of restraint. One can not only earn energy, or for that matter, any kind of a resource or any kind of energy, but besides that, one also needs to conserve energy. Generation and conservation both have to go hand in hand. And here too, the ape god is not only symbolized as the source of pranic energy, as the epitome of pranic energy, but also understood as the epitome of conservation of the body energy, the physical energy, the mental energy, the vital energy. Apart from that, Hanuman, the ape god, is also understood to be symbolizing devotion. Absolutely taintless devotion, without any trace of ambiguity, devotion, unwavering devotion, and service to the cause that has been taken as the core pursuit. Therefore, Arjun chooses Hanuman as the symbol upon his flag, which is being hoisted atop the chariot, while having Keshava sitting right next beside to him. Why Hanuman has been chosen, now it should be easily understood by any seeker. When you are a sincere seeker engaged in your own respective spiritual pursuit, you need adequate reserve of energy in order to see through your own self fearlessly. Not only be able to see yourself fearlessly, but should also be able to charge upon and reform and reconstitute your own individuality. And that is the objective of any spiritual exercise, isn't it? Yes, it is. Therefore, in the verse number 20, it makes a mention that while expressing the intention of being placed right amidst the battlefield, to see eyeball to eyeball the Kaurav warriors, the chariot of the Arjuna is driven, and the chariot bears the flag with the symbol of Hanuman. Now, probably you would have understood why Hanuman has been chosen as the symbol of the flag of Arjuna. Besides, there is another mention. While the chariot is moving towards the middle of the battlefield, Arjuna also lifts his weapon. What is his weapon? His weapon is a bow that has been termed here as Dhanush. Dhanush is the Hindi word for the bow. Now, what is the bow over here? For a spiritual seeker, what does the bow have to do? So far, we have been ascribing the allegory to all spiritual understanding. But here, it is a direct mention of a kind of weapon. It is an arsenal. How would you be able to deliberate a bow in the spiritual parlance? Very right. Now, this is something very important to be understood. A bow or a dhanush, a small arch. It is a representation or a mention or an indication given to the human vertebra. When a seeker in a spiritual pursuit has to start his meditative practice or a contemplation, anything of that kind must sit straight. Before we start our program, we chant Gayatri Mahamantra. And what do I say? I instruct you to sit straight with your back straight And the moment you make your back straight, it is not something which is running vertical, simply vertical, but it acquires a shape of a small arch. If you can take your right or left hand behind towards your back and feel that your back, your vertebra forms like a small arch, and that arch, it looks like a bow, like a dhanush. When Arjuna embarks to lift his bow, it is a mention directly to the seeker before embarking upon this spiritual exercise. Sit with your back straight. Why? Because during the spiritual exercise, any amount of energy that shall arouse or generate could easily travel through the vertebra. There are two subtle nerves, the positive and the negative, namely Ida and Pingala. Most of the readers that have a spiritual inclination would have certainly come across these two names of Ida and Pingala. Besides, they must have also come across another name, which is another subtle nerve. We term it as Sushumna. Whatever energy is generated by the exercise of Ida and Pingala is then furthered and conveyed to Sushumna. And through Sushumna, the entire seat of understanding becomes illuminated. The output of the energy passes through the conduit that we term as the subtle nerve Sushumna, and through Sushumna, the actual illumination starts happening. The awakening happens. The awareness gathers more and more of potency. The potency of the awareness enhances through the feed of Sushumna, which in turn it gathers through the exercise of Ida and Pingala. Both these subtle nerves, they shall only be able to perform their rightful operation when the vertebra, human vertebra, is brought to a straight vertical form. It is considered to be the most mandatory prerequisite for any spiritual seeker to sit with the back straight. I might have a question to ask over here, that I have been sitting with my back straight since past several years, but never has come across any opportune moment whereby I can experience the energy being generated into me or energy flowing through Sushumna. I have never experienced the movement of the currents into me. I have never experienced anything being fed into my brain. Does it happen or not? You may hold a valid question, but I also have a valid question. Your heart is functioning right at this moment. The blood is running through your veins. Your lungs are working. Your kidney is working. Almost all the important organs of your body are working at this moment. Are you able to sight them? No, you're not. And this is a mention to the subtle organs. This is the subtle anatomy of the human existence. You may not be able to experience it right now. For serious and sincere seeker, when they advance in their spiritual pursuit, it is then alone that they shall be able to feel in the gross form the tangible expression of the energy movements, which they can recall, recollect, observe on the surface. But before that, one cannot easily experience it happening. But it does not mean that it does not happen. It is happening all the time. Whenever you sit for any contemplation, whenever you're rightly focused, when you are in a state of thoughtlessness, whenever you're enjoying the void within, maybe for a fraction of a second, the energy moves. In India, we have an ancient science by the name Swarvigyan. In Swarvigyan, the Swar is a term which has been denoted for the left and the right nostril. It is said that the left nostril is for the moon, the cool current, and the right nostril is denoted for the sun, solar, the hot current. And with the movement of the hot and the cold current, the energy comes into form. It is said that at any given point of time, one of the nostril or one of the swar shall be in more function, would be functioning in more. It goes on switching from right to left and left to right. But When there is a switch over from left to right or right to left, during that switching period, both the nostril, they breathe together at the same time for a small interlude. And that interlude generally does not span to more than 30 to 40 seconds. And when that interlude is experienced by any human being, the generation of the body current is immense, and Sushumna is under the flux of body energy during those movements. And this happens with anyone, with any human being, whether in spiritual pursuit or whether not in spiritual pursuit. It is an ordinary exercise which happens with almost everybody. But with the spiritual seeker, intentionally, this particular exercise is engineered. It is engineered in a manner that you sit in a contemplative mood, become thoughtless. The more you try and exert pressure upon yourself, upon your awareness to be thoughtless, to be experience void, the more you give your opportunity to your Ida and Pingala to generate more flux of currents, and then subsequently it is fed to the Sushumna. And all feeding of Sushumna enlightens, illuminates your seat of understanding where you observe your own self. If I ask you to consolidate, roll back your awareness, where shall you roll back? You shall always roll back somewhere in the middle of your skull. Nobody can say that I can roll back my entire awareness into a thumb. No. No other portion in your body is there where you can collect, gather, roll back your entire awareness. It is over here alone. And the Sushumna feeds the entire pranic energy gathered during the spiritual exercise to your seat of understanding, to your seat of awareness. It is therefore that Arjuna, he raises his bow. While raising a bow means sitting with your back straight. And for the kind of engineering we aspire in the technology of consciousness, for a seeker to sit with the back straight is most important. It is therefore, even in the Patanjali Yoga, you must have heard about Patanjali. In Patanjali Yoga, right after certain individual and social norms, yam, niyam, this next part is asana, the posture. Posture is very important. And the most important aspect of the posture is back straight. Whether you recline with the wall, whether you sit on a sofa or a chair, whatever, you utilize any amount of aid. But what is most pertinent and important is that your back should be straight. You should be in the right posture. So asana is the most prominent part to start with. And here the Arjuna, he makes a mention to the asana. But before making a mention to the asana, he has informed you about the restraint upon one's own conduct by simply symbolizing the ape god, the Hanuman. Yam, Niyam all come under Hanuman. A Hanuman is a collective understanding of Yam and Niyam. So, bearing the flag of Hanuman, when a spiritual aspirant embarks upon the spiritual exercise, raises his bow, then he shall be able to charge all those warring factions that dare to thwart his spiritual pursuit. And that is, which is what is mentioned in the verse number 20. I hold all regards and appreciation for the sagacity of the scriptwriter of Bhagavad Gita, Muni Ved Vyas.
Arjuna Uvaj Senyoho Ubhayoho Madhye Ratham Sthapaya Me Achyut.
In the verse number 21, there is something very interesting that finds its mention. As I deliberated last time, that according to the situation, the time which has been expressed in any verse, the script writer has chosen to ascribe any character with a name that appropriates more with the situation there. Like Keshav himself or Arjuna has been assigned various names depending upon the usage. Here in verse number 21, there are two lines. In the first line, the Krishna, the Keshav, he has been addressed as Rishikesh, which means the master of the senses. When the Keshav becomes the rightful master of the senses, senses would never unmindfully wander, rather shall be regulated for a rightful pursuit. At the same time, in the second line of the same verse, the name which has been given to Keshav by the script writer is Achyut. Now, why he has been termed here with a different name? Generally, people have one or two names. One which is known as a proper name or a formal name, another would be a nickname or a pile name which has been assigned by friends or family. But here in Bhagavad Gita, we observe that in light of the situation, each time a new word arises, a new name arises, and here the situation demands for a different name. Therefore, a different name has been attributed to Keshava, which is Achyut. Achyut means the infallible one, the one who shall never change, shall never fall. You can bank upon it, the most trustworthy. That is Achyut, that shall hold you for all times till eternity. We must also understand not only the direct meaning, but also the sense drawn from that particular term. And Achyut here carries a deep sense of something you can bank upon forever, something you can trust upon in any situation, something that shall never leave you, shall always be with you at all times, at all situations, come what may. Why has Keshav been termed as Achyut? Now this name has been, through the epic, assigned by the Arjuna to Keshava. Why? There is a reason for that. Right now, Arjuna has passed on an intention to Keshava to drive, because Keshava is not only the mentor of Arjuna, but recall, he is also the charioteer. He is driving the chariot of Arjuna. In the capacity of a charioteer, now he has been instructed to place the chariot right amidst the battlefield. Now, when this movement is under its way, there is an apprehension that dawns upon Arjuna. The apprehension does not find a direct mention over here. It is something which is reading between the lines. If you understand it from the spiritual pursuit, when a seeker has gone inside fearlessly to rightfully introspect one's own self without any bias, at that moment of time, the seeker at some point also has a small tremor inside that conveys to him, it may not happen that while introspecting yourself, you may not fall a prey, P-R-E-Y. You may not fall back to all those same habits which you have dared to come out from. So that moment of time, there is an element of scare, a fear, an apprehension within Arjuna. And while holding that apprehension, Arjuna assigns a name to Keshav in order to safeguard himself. We all know that we insure our lives, we insure our property, our wealth, our talent. We also have a medical insurance. What is all insurance meant for? It's not that people are sure that they're going to fall sick or things going to become lost or they're going to die. Insurance is always there to assure one that if at all there is any untoward incident, they have a second line of support standing to help them. Same way, Arjuna, with all cleverness, rightful cleverness, assigns another name to Keshava, Achyut, with an apprehension that there are chances for me that while in the spiritual pursuit of introspection, Atma Avalokan, Atma Darshan, there are chances I may fall. I may fall. Therefore, I assign you, I create an insurance of my own self immediately by ascribing you with the name Achyut. I may fall a million times, but you shall never fail to lift me again. And the same happens. In our spiritual pursuit, there are countless occasions that we fall, there are distortions, there are deviations from our spiritual exercises. We change our habits, we change our norms, we go back to the square one. But then again, one fine morning or in some opportune moment, there dawns a streak of again inspiration to again gather the entire energy and recharge one's own self again for a spiritual exercise. And it goes on within a seeker for countless times. Bhagavad Gita time and again makes a mention that there is not one fall for any spiritual seeker. There are countless falls for any spiritual seeker. But one should be assured and insured within that let there be any number of fall, each time there would stand Achyut beside you. Achyut, the one you can bank upon at all times, who shall never fail to come again, hold your hand and make you arise. Therefore, Arjuna assigns a name here to Keshava, Achyut. Hey Achyut, one, the infallible one, now you are placing my chariot right amidst the battlefield. I am going to be face to face with the warring faction. There are chances for me to fall back. But I know you can hold me. You are the net. Let me fall. You are the net. You are the savior. You will save me again. Holding that trust and ascribing Keshava with that name, Arjun goes on.
यावत् एतान निरीक्षे अहम युद्ध कामान अवस्थितान कैहरम्या सह योद्धव्यम अस्मिन् रण समुद्यमे यो तस्य माना अवीक्षे अहम यह ते अत्र समागतः धारतराष्ट्रस्य दुर्बुद्धेः युधे प्रियचिकीर्ष्वः.
In the verse number 22, 23, the same mention of the mobility of the chariot right amidst the battlefield finds its mention over here, while now Arjuna also declares his deep intention by naming Duryodhan. I want to see who all are siding with the Duryodhan, who all have betrayed us, or who all are standing beside him to fight with us. Let me see them eye to eye. I want to observe them. I want to see them. Yes, it happens with any spiritual seeker. With some advancement in one's own spiritual pursuit, adequate levels of energy, they come in place within a seeker, where a seeker finds that he can challenge his own propensities, all the miscreants which have intruded into him since any part of time, any life from any part of time. Now he is able enough to charge upon them. What actually happens is something different. Generally what happens is that spiritual aspirants, they have countless falls, but each time they fall and each time they arise with the help of the Achyut, the true inspiration of the divine intuit, any Arjuna of any time would again charge upon the miscreants inside, because this is the war, the battlefield of the divine and the demonic, which transpires within a seeker itself. There is nothing which is externalized. It is a total process of internalization. Now here, the most important is the verse number 24.
एवं मुक्ताः ऋषिकेशः गुडाकेशेन भारत सेनयो उभयो मध्ये स्थापयित्वा रथो उत्तमम्.
24, I deliberated last time that the entire Bhagavad Gita and the epic of Mahabharata, as it unfolds, there is an excellent character, the journalist by the name Sanjay. Sanjay has been assigned to the blind emperor Dhritarashtra, who has usurped the throne of the Pandavas, as a facility who can visualize all that is transpiring on the battlefield and narrate him in accordance to that. Frankly speaking, Sanjay is a pure journalist. But somewhere, while I have observed in the previous verses too, in the same Bhagavad Gita, I understand him as slightly colored towards the divine forces. And that color will find its trace in the first part of the shloka, in the verse number 24. Here, Sanjay, the journalist in service of the blind emperor, shall address him as Bharata. Hey Bharata, that means you are the
Descendant
of that great force, great emperor, the Bharata. You are the
descendant.
Why does he wants to recall him about his lineage? Why? Somewhere Sanjay has an idea in the mind, maybe if I address Dhritarashtra, the blind emperor, who is unmindfully charging upon the Pandavas, has usurped the throne, maybe if I recall him about his dignified, glorious past beheld by his ancestors, maybe somewhere wisdom arises. And therefore, Sanjay addresses him here as Bharata. Not only that, apart from that, here we find Arjuna with a different name. Who has assigned him the name? Oh yes, it is the script writer. But script writer is utilizing various characters to make the addressals. Here the addressal has been made through the Keshava. Keshava is addressing Arjuna as Gudakesh. Gudakesh is another name. What does it mean? Gudakesh means someone who would always experience the constant equitable vigilance. Vigilant at all times, in continuity, who shall never cease to be vigilant. Someone to whom inertia, sloth, slender shall never be able to put a scath. He will be unscathed of all these miscreants and will never experience inertia. Now Rishikesh makes an addressal to Arjuna as Gudakesh. Why? Because somewhere Rishikesh knows, the Keshav now understands that Arjuna has now taken a very bold and daring step, which is an enterprising step, which is full of risk and danger. And whenever you have any risk or danger on such situations, even while driving in night on a highway, we expect the driver to be well alert, and the moment we apprehend any kind of slumber or sloth on the driver, he would immediately charge to talk to him and say, are you feeling sleepy? Do you feel a need to have a cup of tea? So that one can easily come out of that inertia. Here too, Keshav understands that now when the Arjuna would be standing face to face right in front of all his cousins and uncles and the grandsire and the guru, there are chances that he would hold a bias towards them. There are chances that his old propensities and habits, which he has been cultivating since unknown times through past lives, may allure him and might again deceive him, deviate him from his spiritual pursuit. Therefore, to remind him to remain alert, absolutely vigilant, he is given a name, Gudakesh, one who has won over the sleep. Hey Gudakesh. The names have not simply been given as a poetic expression. It may be a poetic expression, but with a very serious intent, denoting the movements that go within any seeker. Any seeker, after some time of spiritual pursuit, then his old propensities arise and he can come back to the same habits, same leaning, same yearning, same kind of inkling. And there are all chances that he would be deviated once again. So that he does not deviate, he remains stationary. Kesha, the divine intuit within any seeker, charges him, addresses him with the name Gudakesh. You never sleep, you shall never sleep, you shall never yield before sloth or any kind of negligence. You're always alert and vigilant. And in the next line of the same verse number 24, here the mention is made that now the chariot of Arjuna is placed right in the middle of the battlefield. So far it was a movement. When we started from 20, 21, 22 and 23, the verse number 20, 21, 22, 23, it was an intention expressed by Arjuna before his charioteer Keshav to drive his chariot amidst the forces. And then in 21, 22, 23, the chariot was on its move. But now it is stationed in the verse number 24, it is stationed right amidst the battlefield. And therefore, when the apprehension enhances, the risk and the danger enhance, therefore the name has been assigned Gudakesh, the sleepless one, one who is always alert, always vigilant. In verse number 25,
भीष्म द्रोण प्रमुखतः सर्वेषां च महीक्षिता उवाच पार्थ पश्यैतान् समवेतान् कुरुनिति.
we find a very interesting mention. What does mention say? There are two very important mention over here. Number one, that Arjuna again by his mentor, by the divine intuit within, has been assigned another name. He has got so many names now. He has got name of Arjuna, he is the name of Gudakesh, he has a name of Dhananjay, and another name in verse number 25 is Partha. Why Partha? Because here in verse number 25 it makes a mention that the moment his chariot is placed right amidst the battlefield, who are the most prominent warriors visible over there? The most prominent warriors standing right affront Arjuna are Bhishma and Drona. One who is the grandsire and the another who is the teacher, the master of Arjuna, one who trained him. And who is Bhishma over here? Bhishma is the understanding of one's own me-ness. As I coined a word last time, me, M-E-ness. It may not be a word existing in the dictionary, but drawing and taking liberty of the sense drawn of the word about the feeling of one's own me-ness, one's isness. I exist. This body is mine, this brain is mine, this intellect is mine, this mind is mine, this memory is mine. It's me. When I am ascertained, only thereafter anything which is mine shall come into place. First of all, there has to be ascertainment of me, the meanness in me, that awareness, that bodh we call it as, that bodh, the understanding, awareness is Bhishma Pitama. And it is a contaminated understanding. Why? Because the pure understanding for any being, pure existence for any being is the isness of soul. But when soul is sheathed in any human existence, in a body bearing a ego, chitta, mind, mana, and the intellect, buddhi, then it becomes contaminated. Here, the contaminated understanding about one's own self is ego, and that is Bhishma. It is not the true isness. It is not the true existence. It's merely a projection of the true existence that is enshrined in each one of us. Now, when Arjuna stands right amidst the battlefield, and if I understand it as a seeker, in my spiritual pursuit, while introspecting myself, there would be a time when I would maybe I hold a special bias to be recognized as I am in the society. It's me, known as this, known for this, known with all this. It is true me. It may not be a true me, but there are all chances that I cannot easily denounce the fact or detach myself or distance myself from that contaminated understanding that I have been experiencing right from the day I got the awareness. And this awareness has traveled along with me through several past births. And here the script writer makes a mention, the moment the chariot is placed amidst the battlefield, two prominent warriors that confront Arjuna right at the outset is first the projected understanding about the me, the true self, that is the meanness, Bhishma. And the second is the propensities that have been created, crafted, accumulated since times unknown, which we term in Sanskrit as sanskar. Propensity may not be able to encompass the appropriate understanding, but sanskar does, and it's a very deep word. And here, Dronacharya is the sanskar in a human being. Therefore, it says in Bhagavad Gita, the saying goes that the extract of Bhagavad Gita, the nectar of Bhagavad Gita is Abhyas or Vairagya. Abhyas means practice. Go on practicing your efforts. Endless efforts. Abhyas, Nirantar Abhyas. And Vairagya is detachment, renunciation, to distance one's own self in the capacity of a seer, of a spectator, and understanding the rightful placement of one's own constitution. Here, Bhishma, one can combat Bhishma through Vairagya. The moment you detach and distance, Vairagya or renunciation here does not mean to relinquish one's own self from all material possessions. No, in no way. You may be holding an excellent S-Class Mercedes. You may be holding a palatial bungalow, a farmhouse. You may be holding a personal jet. You may be holding your own exclusive island, holding all affluence, yet you can be a renunciator. You can renounce. What does renunciation and detachment mean? It means that your own true individuality is not mingled, does not become an inextricable part of your possession. This is my mobile phone, but this is not me. When you want to be known for this mobile phone, it means that you're indulged. This is indulgence. And what is detachment? Detachment with the same mobile is, yes, I utilize it for various meaningful purposes, but it's not me. This mobile cannot create my recognition. When people want to be recognized externally with their own materialistic possession, that is termed as indulgence. But when they rightfully allocate and appropriate their understanding to the objects, they detach from the objects and they come back to their true individuality, that is termed as renunciation. And that is what the script writer here intends to make a mention. He makes a mention that Bhishma and Drona are standing right in front of the Partha. Arjun has been given the name Partha. Why Partha? Because the mother of Arjun was Kunti. Kunti was born to an emperor by the name Shura. Now Shura, Kunti was his daughter. Shura had a very close friend by the name Kunti Bhoj. Kunti Bhoj was childless emperor. He did not have any children. And under some understanding and the bonding between the two friends, Kunti was adopted by Kunti Bhoj. But that moment of time when she was the daughter of Shura, her name was Pritha. Pritha. But when she was adopted by Kunti Bhoj, her name became Kunti. And therefore, we also see at various places that these Pandav brothers have been assigned with the name Kaunteya. Even Arjuna at number of places he has been addressed as Kaunteya. But here he has been addressed as Parth. Parth means one who belongs to Pritha. One who belongs to Pritha, the son of Pritha is Parth. What does Pritha mean? Pritha means pure renunciation, pure detachment. Pure renunciation and detachment is Pritha. And one who can observe purest form of renunciation can only graduate to become Kunti. What does Kunti mean? Kunti means one who is able to invoke divine power, the divinity. One who is eligible and potent to invoke divinity is Kunti. Unless you renounce the materialistic understanding, your indulgence, you cannot claim the eligibility to be potent enough to invoke the divinity within your own self. Now here, since there is a strong apprehension to the divine intelligence, that is the Keshav, that there are chances for the Arjuna to become indulged. There are chances for him to fall from his efforts and become indulged and recognize himself with the individuality of Bhishma, Drona, individuality of the meanness, this is me, and his propensities. He may not fall back to them. Therefore, he addresses him with the name Partha. Recall that you have renounced everything. You are the true epitome of detachment, hey Partha. Each place, the name assigned and ascribed to the character holds a relevance to the situation there. In the first verse 24, the Keshav, the divine intelligence, intends the spiritual seeker to be vigilant. Therefore, he is assigned with the name Gudakesh. In the next verse, in number 25, the divine intuit intends that there should not be a spell, a venom cast by the understanding and projection of the meanness that is Bhishma and the propensity the Drona. Therefore, observe that you have renounced, you have distanced, you have detached, you hold appropriate understanding about all facts of life. This all transpires within a seeker. The human existence is the laboratory where entire spiritual exercise shall dispense. This draws me to conclude at the verse number 25. Next time we shall continue from verse number 26. To what extent, I am not sure. It is all upon the one who has bestowed upon me the bliss of understanding to be able to deliberate this excellent edifice of knowledge to you. Therefore, I do not hold any individual discretion to make a mention that how many verses shall I be able to embark. Meet you next time. A happy viewing for Bhagavad Gita to all the viewers. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.